Titanfall is one of my favourite new IPs of this entire console generation. In fact, the original game is why I bought the Xbox One. So when EA acquired Respawn Entertainment and the rights to the Titanfall series, I looked to discuss the implications of this with my gaming friends, only to realise that the vast majority of them had never even played either game. This is what led me to making this video. I am GB from UB2 Gaming, and I want to discuss if the Titanfall series has been successful. In order to really answer this question, I think we need to go over the historical timeline of not only the releases, critical receptions and sales figures of the franchise, but also the reason for its inception and why it had such high expectations. After all, Titanfall was the first game from a brand new development studio called Respawn Entertainment. Most of the time, a game from a brand new studio does not have much hype. Titanfall, however, was a big exception to this rule. There was a huge amount of anticipation and excitement as it came to release. What made Titanfall and Respawn different is the fact that the founders of this new studio and game were Jason West and Vince Zampella. For those of you who do not know, these two gentlemen were co-founders of Infinity Ward alongside Grant Collier. They were pivotal in turning Call of Duty into the juggernaut it is today. On March 1st, 2010, both Jason and Vince were unceremoniously fired from Infinity Ward in a cloud of mystery as Activision cited breaches of contract and insubordination. Over the next couple of months, 46 other employees abruptly resigned from Infinity Ward, and the vast majority of them decided to join Jason and Vince at their beautifully named studio, Respawn Entertainment. In my opinion, this is a big reason why there was so much hype to Titanfall despite being the first game of a new studio. Respawn had a lot more pedigree than most, as so many gamers were looking forward to seeing what the creative minds behind Call of Duty would come up with now that they were free to express themselves. I also firmly believe the nature in which they left Activision played a big part. Remember, this is a few years ago now, when Call of Duty was in the midst of its golden period, with Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops being hugely successful. But this was also when the hate towards Call of Duty was also at its zenith. The term Call of Duty killer was used a lot when referring to Respawn and their Project Titanfall. When your game is seen as the one to take down Call of Duty, you better believe there was a lot of hype. No pressure, guys. Respawn ended up selecting EA as their publisher through their partners program. This is arguably the seed that would lead to some of their problems later on. The first of which is obvious in hindsight, but was probably seen as a great decision at the time. Titanfall was a console launch exclusive for the Xbox. It sounds crazy now, but before that awful reveal for the Xbox One, Microsoft was seen as being in pole position for this console generation. The 360 had really taken massive chunks out of the market share compared to the original Xbox, going from being outsold by about 5 or 6 times to being about even. Microsoft had all of the momentum. EA had made a bet on Xbox being the dominant console of this generation. They could not have been more wrong. The PlayStation 4 was by far and away the more successful at launch. At the time of Titanfall's release in March 2014, the PS4 was outselling the Xbox One 3-1, and even more shocking, in most European markets they had over 80% of the market share. This meant, through no fault of their own, Respawn had lost the opportunity to sell Titanfall to 75% of the 8th console generation market. An opportunity lost is a huge understatement. This issue was further compounded by the fact that Vince Zampella tweeted the following before Titanfall's release: "Always Microsoft exclusive at launch, great partner, and focus is good for a startup. EA made a deal for the rest. We only found out recently. Unhappy face." This clearly outlined that the decision to be fully exclusive to Microsoft on consoles through the entire lifetime of Titanfall was against the will of Respawn. I honestly believe This decision and strategy concocted by EA cost Titanfall millions of sales. I think the Xbox One's terrible release ended up affecting Titanfall itself. Before it was released, it was heavily praised and rewarded by critics. At E3 2013, it set a record by winning 6 Critics Awards, including Best of Show. Even once it was released, it was heavily praised for its incredible gameplay, speed, and by how fun it was. However, as gamers spent more time with it, the problems began to show. The single player campaign was awful, and there was a lack of replay ability. There was no real customization, a lack of variety in the Titans and multiplayer modes. It felt like a game that was released half a year early. I genuinely believe Xbox being dominated by the PS4 led to Titanfall being released in the spring of 2014 rather than Q4. Microsoft, no doubt feeling the pressure, rushed out the Xbox One Titanfall bundle. Despite this, Titanfall could be considered a success under the circumstances. According to NPD figures at the time, the game sold just shy of 1 million copies during the month of its release. Remember to note that this does not include digital sales, bundle sales, or sales outside of the US. So it's safe to assume that it sold over 1 million copies during its first month. That is a good total for a new IP, but disappointing compared to the hype. Microsoft, EA and Respawn attempted to add more longevity to the game by adding it to EA Access and Games with Gold, essentially giving the game away for free. This eventually led to Vince Zampella tweeting in 2015, celebrating 10 million. Now it is plainly obvious this wasn't physical sales, but included all those that had tried the game for free with EA Access and Games with Gold. Nevertheless, most games never reach 10 million players, let alone a brand new game. Overall, I would consider Titanfall 1 a success, although it underachieved. The one thing it did do was lay a great foundation for its sequel, Titanfall 2. All those involved with Titanfall seemed to learn their lessons and made positive decisions with Titanfall 2. The first obvious one was it was released as a multi-platform title. No longer an Xbox exclusive, it now had the potential to reach millions of PS4 owners. Respawn also addressed one of the main criticisms of the game by including a true single-player campaign. Titanfall 2 had a much better story that was praised by critics and gamers alike. Although it was a bit short, it was an overall great experience. They also increased the replayability by adding a huge array of customization options to the game. Respawn had really made a lot of effort into improving Titanfall 2, and this was reflected in its critical reception. Titanfall 2 seemed primed to eclipse Titanfall 1 sales and become an established franchise in its own right. The problem was, Titanfall 2 was not a success. In fact, it was a failure. This has been publicly acknowledged by EA. The game did not meet their expectations. But why did this happen? It seemed Respawn and EA had done all of the right things by addressing the issues of the first game and also increasing its potential market. Without a doubt, the first reason for the poor sales of Titanfall 2 is the release date. EA made one of the most stupid decisions in recent years. They decided to release Titanfall 2 between Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. They decided to release an up-and-coming FPS game in between two of the biggest FPS game franchises ever, one of which, Battlefield 1, is a game that EA also publishes. That makes sense. Seriously, they released Battlefield 1 October 21st, Titanfall 2 on the 28th, and Call of Duty came out 4th of November. Despite analysts warning that the sales of Titanfall 2 would be substantially disappointing, EA decided to ignore them and recited that the player bases would not overlap. This was such a poor decision, as it was forcing most gamers to make a choice between the three games. Most people would not be able to afford all 3 games, and at best would only buy 2. In this case, Titanfall 2 definitely lost out. This is highlighted by the sales figures. In the UK, Titanfall 1 debuted number 1 when it was only available on Xbox, which was struggling at the time. Titanfall 2, despite being available to a much bigger market, came in at number 4. Battlefield 1 was first for the second week running. Even Skyrim's Special Edition sold more, as it came in second place. This poor start was further compounded by EA's nonsense PR statement, where they mentioned, "We remind people, we're building a franchise with Titanfall. So it's not about the first day of sales or the first week of sales, it's about the long run." Publishers take every opportunity to gloat about a fast start, but they rarely feel the need to damage control a bad release. That is how poor the sales were for Titanfall 2. Remember, EA hoped the game would sell 9 to 10 million copies during its first year. A second reason why I believe Titanfall 2 underachieved is the fact that there will be some PlayStation owners who would simply not buy Titanfall games due to its association with Xbox. Even in this day and age, fanboyism is alive and well. Now, it is a vocal minority, but for me, there is no doubt, despite being released to a much larger market, Titanfall 2 will have automatically lost sales due to its previous exclusive deal with Xbox. I think the third and almost forgotten reason for the poor sales performance is due to the much weaker marketing campaign compared to Titanfall 1. I spoke about the exclusive deal with Microsoft being a negative, but there was one positive. Microsoft really did market the game very strongly, as it was released only a few months after the Xbox One. They really did advertise Titanfall 1 as a blockbuster game. This was certainly not the case for Titanfall 2. The marketing campaign was a lot weaker, and it was in direct competition with other big games who had much bigger marketing budgets, the most obvious ones being Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty. Overall, despite being a much superior game, Titanfall 2 was a big disappointment in sales performance. In conclusion, the Titanfall series has had a mixed success rate. Although it has sold more than most brand new IPs, it has underwhelmed and failed to reach its true potential due to a mixture of bad luck and awful decision making. It could have been one of the premier FPS games by now. Instead, it is still playing catch up. With its recent acquisition by EA, I am a little concerned about the future of the Titanfall series, but pleased that it has been confirmed that there will be future installments to the franchise. I am GB from UB2 Gaming. Thank you very much for listening. Please do like and subscribe.